Day 724 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at the Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 402,000 military personnel losses, which represents an additional 1,080 in the past 24 hours. Then as for hardware losses, so 11 tanks, a whopping 53 APVs, 40 artillery, and even 3 military jets. So we'll head back across to the map now and firstly look at that impressive feat, as in a significant blow to Russia's military operations, Ukraine's air force successfully shot down 3 Russian aircraft, including 2 Su-34 fighter jets and 1 Su-35 combat plane. Just yesterday morning the 17th, as confirmed by Ukraine's Air Force commander. And this recent incident adds to the growing list of Russian aerial losses, which notably included a costly Bereev A-50 military radar plane, which of course you may remember that was downed just last month. And so the destruction of these most recent high-end Russian aircraft jet planes in Ukraine's east underscores a troubling trend for Russia, which has seen over 330 planes lost since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And that's what we know of. So now, interestingly, following these losses, there's evidence of a strategic shift by Russia, notably reducing air sorties, very likely in response to the increased risk highlighted by Ukrainian military effectiveness and downing of these aircraft. Now, the downed planes, with one captured reportedly in this video footage near Daykovo in the Luhansk Oblast, further illustrates the challenges Russia faces, despite conflicting reports from Russian sources about the extent of their losses. So this incident not only highlights the ongoing struggles of the Russian Air Force, but also suggests a significant deterrent impact of Ukrainian air defense capabilities on Russian aerial operations. And in classic Russian style, it was denied straight up by a prominent Russian war blogger on Telegram, then later, confirmed. And on the left you might see there, it was initially such vehemently denied rhetoric going on there, just hours before their own confirmation. But that's just how Russia operates. They deny straight up, then later begrudgingly accept. Then we move to Izhevsk of central Russia again, as there was another massive fire, this time at a plant that reportedly produces Russian UAVs. And bearing in mind, this is a whopping 1,300 kilometers, or about 800 miles, away from Ukraine. And although this range is probably technically feasible for Ukraine to reach with its one-way UAV drones these days, the cause of this incident could have more likely come from atrocious Russian safety standards that we've seen time and time again, or partisan activity, or Sergei the Smoker. Then briefly, we move to Belgorod in the Russian mainland, as once again explosions were reported over the region, which is all very likely due to Ukrainian UAVs keeping Russian air defenses busy instead of giving them a chance to use some of those offensive surface-to-surface platforms, which decidedly have fairly horrible accuracy when used in this way. So at this stage of the war, we're likely to see almost a daily continuation of events just like these happening just beyond the Ukrainian border with Russia. Then we head to some of the biggest news in the last day, as Ukrainian forces, led by Commander-in-Chief Syrsky, were compelled to retreat from Avdiivka as a result of numerical superiority breakthrough, signaling Russia's first notable territorial gain in months after a protracted and costly battle in this zone for them. So, although despite achieving this land capture, Russia's efforts have indeed revealed a grim picture of heavy casualties and armoured losses, as, like I've previously said, with Russia's losses in this region alone equaling the size of a medium to large European army. All because they were dead set in their determination, enduring over 60% personnel losses to gain not even 1% of Ukrainian land, but instead 0.01% of land. Golly. So, despite this tactical setback for Ukraine, the broader strategic outlook for Russia does arguably appear bleak. You see, the massive loss of life and battle tanks, for instance, plus the destruction of key cities like Bakhmut and Severodonetsk into desolate landscapes, and the creation of a paradoxical buffer zone on territory Russia pledged to protect, all point to a Pyrrhic victory at best. So, the sustained resistance from Ukraine and the potential for increased Western support casts doubt on Russia's ability to secure a decisive victory, suggesting that the conflict's toll on Russia might eventually lead to a critical undermining of its military and political ambitions. Or put much more simply, Russian military tactics have remained largely unchanged, as their army continues to choose to feed itself into the AFU meat grinder. But also, as you know, I do love the contextual relevance of a map, as these things more or less don't lie. Take, for instance, we'll pull out the ruler and we'll pop this into the middle and we'll have a look. So in this sector, Russia has only made an 8 or 9 kilometer push, or about 5 miles or so, from their February 2022 lines. So we're not just looking at 5 months of Russian pushes to gain this distance, but truly we're looking at nearly 24 months worth of Russian losses to gain this ground. Then we move across on the map today to Robotyne of the Zaporizhia region, as we saw some footage of fleeing Russian forces after their attempt to storm the town. Now, previously, information emerged that Russia had accumulated forces south of Robotyne. Then today, they started offensives into the town coming from the south, of course, but were shortly thereafter repelled. Then moving right across on the map, as in a concerning turn of events near the Ukrainian border, Moldova's discovery of a Shahed-type drone fragment. I'm just looking for this one here, and yep, there it is. So on the Moldovan side, near its border with Ukraine, along with a 50-kilogram warhead from a Russian drone near Odessa from last week, all of which has raised tensions in the region. And as a result, ongoing situations like these ones certainly cast Russia in a negative light, showing its own military operations growing threat to neighbouring countries. Then headed across to some news for today, quite a bit, but I'll just go through the main parts today. So in some absolutely massive hardware news for Ukraine, Czech President Pavel announced that Czechia has identified a source of approximately 800,000 artillery shells, crucial for Ukraine's defense efforts, which could be dispatched within mere weeks, provided that allied nations like Germany, Britain, France, USA, and others offer financial support to buy them for Ukraine, basically. So Pavel's statements at the Munich Security Conference highlighted the urgent need for external funding to procure the ammo for Ukraine, which, by the way, specifically comprises of exactly 300,000 122mm shells and 500,000 155mm shells, which is truly a staggering figure that could be put to use on Ukrainian front lines almost straight away. And with the EU grappling with its own supply limitations and seeking to fulfill its commitments by the end of 2024 and beyond, Czechia's proactive stance, which, let's be honest, these shells are not old stockpiles that the Czech Republic has happened to stumble upon, but instead were very, very likely purchased from nations such as Turkey, South Africa, and not the least of which is South Korea. Thus, this latest development paints a grim picture for Russia as international support for Ukraine continues to solidify despite the challenges in mobilizing the necessary resources due to slow production ramp-ups. So 500,000 155mm artillery shells. Receiving them in an instant could be the very thing needed to bridge the gap between the EU's and NATO's production pledges to Ukraine versus when those ones are actually finally delivered in steady monthly volumes to Ukraine. And I really do hope that the political will internationally is there to buy these artillery shells soon, because the Ukrainian army, through necessity from long standing low volumes of artillery shells, has effectively forced them to become very effective, very accurate, and extremely proficient with each and every artillery shell they have. And I state this as reported from the Russian side that has had to deal with it. So I really cannot tell you how massive of an instantaneous bump this would be to Ukrainian frontline efforts right now. Then, in some similar news, Denmark has decided to transfer all of its artillery to Ukraine, with Danish PM Frederiksen during the Munich Security Conference stating, quote, "I am sorry, friends, but the issue is not only production. Europe has weapons, ammunition, and air defense systems that we are not using yet. This must be transferred to Ukraine. They need them more now." So the Danish PM called on European states to provide more ammunition and air defense systems to Ukraine, and although I can understand most European nations need to have sufficient air defense installations in their country, she makes a lot of sense on the artillery shell front, as the vast majority of European nations do not use their artillery shell stockpiles at all, and given that most artillery shells are only able to reach a distance of, say, 40 kilometers or 25 miles, then nearly all European nations don't have any, shall we say, enemy artillery shell natural predators on this front, on this range. So Denmark is an absolute trailblazer in this regard. And fingers crossed, other safely tucked away European nations will follow suit as well. Then, in some more Ukrainian hardware news, Germany announced its latest military aid package to Ukraine, including 2 additional Skynex air defense systems, 36 self-propelled howitzers. These are the PZHs, the PZH 2000s, a very capable 155mm platform. Then, more RST air defense missiles. Then, last but not least, 120,000 rounds of artillery ammunition, most of which are the 122mm caliber. So this package is worth 1.1 billion euros and comes on top of other recently announced security assistance measures as well. Then, in some other news, and in a grim turn of events you've probably already heard about, but the death of Alexei Navalny, a leading figure in opposition to President Putin and a vocal critic of the Russian war in Ukraine, marks a chilling continuation in the pattern of silencing political dissent within Russia. And Navalny, aged 47, died under mysterious circumstances in prison on February 16th, shortly after feeling unwell during a walk, leading to immediate loss of consciousness. Now, despite apparently stated efforts to revive him, he was pronounced dead, with the Russian prison authorities attributing his without warning demise to sudden death syndrome, which, needless to say, is not a formal condition or diagnosis. It does not indicate a specific medical condition. So this incident not only adds Navalny to the long list of Putin's critics who have met untimely deaths, but also highlights the dangers faced by those opposing the Kremlin's policies. And also to this, the aftermath of Navalny's death has seen a draconian-style crackdown by Russian authorities, with over 350 people detained across the country for participating in peaceful protests or merely just paying their respects at makeshift memorials. Cities like St. Petersburg and Moscow witnessed the arrest of mourners in particular, which truly paints a dystopian picture of a government ruthlessly suppressing any form of dissent. However, Navalny's formally recorded message in the event that he was to be eliminated by the Kremlin said something to the effect of, "Don't be scared, don't give up, and stand up against the Russian tyrants." Interestingly, it was reported that the prison where opposition figure Navalny met his demise had published news of his death astonishingly quickly, just 2 minutes after the event. And this swift dissemination of news, mirrored by the rapid reporting of Prigozhin's plane crash, if you remember that one, which certainly casts an untrustworthy shadow over Russia's efficiency in a less savory context. If only their military were that efficient. And I can't help but think about imprisoned Russian political opponent Igor Gherkin, undoubtedly concerned that he could be the next. But I would also say that ultimately, Putin would have been better off to do his utmost to keep Navalny alive, as these types of events tend to have the politically unintended effect of causing a fracture within the national psyche that makes it pretty darn impossible for the local population to continue to stick their heads in the sand about what's really happening at home. Then headed across to a quick funny to lighten things a bit up today there. And in this next one, it's kind of my specialty area, given the amount I've spoken about Russian military corruption in the last many months. So the Russian army has received a whole bunch of non-functioning props installed on their armored hardware, as there's been a multitude of reports that Russian forces noticed that their shiny new Volnarez electronic warfare jammers weren't working, which are designed to more or less protect Russian tanks from incoming Ukrainian FPV one-way drones. But in this case, one was disassembled by a Russian tanker as they noticed something suspicious about the ineffective nature of these devices. And then they discovered, firstly, terribly cheap build quality, and then also the position of key elements that are otherwise designed to create electronic noise or false signals that confuse or degrade the effectiveness of enemy electronic equipment, had revealed it to be merely a literal prop, incapable of actually working. But had the Russian tanker not done that, taken it apart to see what's going on, it would have given a nice confidence boost still, don't you think? And we've seen a lot of poorly performing Russian hardware come from the Russian military production facilities, or indeed from China in the past, but I don't recall a time when we've seen the purest form of Russian military corruption like this, as clearly the misappropriation of funding from military contractors has reached entirely new lows, with this complete fakery only designed to line the pockets of the Russian oligarchs that pretty easily scored the contract to produce them. That's our classic Russia. So that will be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please leave a comment and like, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.